I'm reading from Rays of the One Light, weekly commentaries on the Bible and Bhagavad Gita, written by Swami Kriyananda, based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. This week's reading is entitled Resurrection for Every Soul. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. In the Gospel of St. John, we read the inspiring account of Jesus' resurrection. The first day of the week cometh Mary Magdalene early, when it was yet dark, into the sepulchre, and saw the stone taken away from the sepulchre. Then she runneth, and cometh to Simon Peter and to the other disciple whom Jesus loved, and saith unto them, They have taken away the Lord. Then the same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, came Jesus and stood in their midst and saith unto them, Peace be with you. The resurrection of Jesus, doubted by many but affirmed by those who were close to him, was a miraculous event, though one not unique in history, for many great saints of other religions have appeared to their disciples after death. Sometimes their appearances have been, as that of Jesus was, in flesh and blood form, and not only in vision. Yogananda relates in Autobiography of a Yogi the account of his guru, Sri Yukteswar's resurrection after his earthly passing. Miracles of this type are revealed only rarely to the masses, but accounts of them, related by men and women of reputed truthfulness, have inspired many devotees with faith in the reality of subtler than material states of existence. Resurrection, Yogananda explains, means transformation ultimately from any lower state of being to a higher one. Worldly consciousness cannot imagine such transformation except in terms of perhaps an improvement of the present mess of pottage with the addition of a new flavoring. Divine consciousness, however, is capable of taking the base metal of worldliness and transforming it into the spiritual gold of divine wisdom and love. In keeping with this truth, the Bhagavad Gita in the 9th chapter tells us, Ah, ye who have come into this ill world, fleeting and false, set your faith fast on me. Fix heart and thought on me. Adore me. Bring offerings to me. Make me prostrations. Make me your supremest joy. And undivided unto my rest your spirits shall be guided. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Happy Easter, everyone. It's a beautiful time of year to experience spring and how seemingly the dead has come back to life. It was never really dead at all. It was just withdrawn for a time. It's so heavenly to see all the bulbs coming up into flowers, everything renewed, refreshed. We've been serenaded every day by birds in our garden, birds that have a tremendous repertoire of songs. They just go on and on. It's quite amazing. Well, I wanted to tell you a story from a book that my friend Sandy lent me to read. It's called Physicians' Untold Stories. And being men and women of science, they rarely get into the supernatural, but many, many physicians have beautiful stories of miracles that really can't be explained any other way except through the intervention of a higher power. And this one particular story really stood out. It was written by the author of the book, and he told the story of this young girl who was about 15 at the time that this happened to her, the beginning of a great difficulty. And she was playing the flute in the orchestra. She was a gymnast. She was very active in her church youth group. And suddenly, in the gymnasium class, you would miss the rings and fall on the ground. And she started bumping into walls, and she's just having a terrible time, blurred vision. Many, many tests and many doctors later, she was diagnosed with very progressive MS. And with great difficulty, she managed to graduate from high school. And she entered college, but she started having double vision. She had to drop out. Well, she had some remissions and relapses. She kept trying to go back to college. As a handicapped student, she tried to work as a secretary. But eventually, she just got to the point where her joints contracted. She couldn't stand on her legs. Her lung collapsed. On and on and on. She became legally blind. Very, very difficult time. Still a young woman. And she went into hospice, expected to not live for more than a couple more months. Well, on the day of her sister's birthday, there were many visitors and a party at this girl's house. The girl with MS was called Barbara. And she tried to help with the preparations for her sister's party, but even in a power chair, even with attached oxygen on the chair so she could breathe, she became very, very tired. And her aunt was there, and her aunt showed Barb this big sack of mail, and the aunt could barely lift it. She had to drag it into Barb's room, and she proceeded to open these cards and letters that had come to Barb because of a local radio station had aired her story. And the overwhelming response of love and prayer that had come through that story, her aunt wanted her to see and hear about that. So she read her many of these letters, and almost every one had a prayer for her healing. So eventually the party was done and her aunt left, and later in the afternoon, 2 girlfriends from Barb's church came over to visit her, and they were sitting with her. Barb was lying in the bed and was, as I say, very, very tired, so she couldn't talk very much. And eventually there was a little lull in the conversation, and Barb heard a voice behind her, a man's voice, and there was no man in the room. And she said to her friends, "Did you hear that?" No, hear what? "God just told me to get up and walk." And they didn't know what to think. What has happened to our friend? And Barb said, "Go and call my parents. I want them to see this." And she felt immediately that she had to respond to this divine instruction to as the words had said, "My child, get up and walk." And so she leaped out of bed onto legs that had not been able to support her in years. And she tore out her oxygen, and she ran to her mother's arms. And her mother knelt down immediately and felt her calves, and she said, "My God, you have muscles in your legs again." And her dad swept her up and danced her around the room. And from that day, she was normal. Her lungs were normal. Her joints were normal. Her legs, her muscles had come back. Her vision was fine. She married a minister and spent the rest of her life, she may even still be alive today, I don't know. The rest of her life, she served others. This is often the way. If we catch a glimpse of divinity, if we are resurrected in some small form or in a dramatic form like this young woman, she was resurrected. And what did she want to do? She wanted to give. I can only hazard a guess. The story doesn't really say what she was thinking, what she was feeling. But it does say in the beginning of her story, when she was first diagnosed, she had trouble believing in a supreme being. She had trouble not being angry with a God who could inflict this on an innocent young girl. But with the help of her family and her ministers and her church friends, her faith grew stronger in a loving God who participates in our lives. Just as this Gita reading says, we need to cling to that God, to lean on that God, to make him an active part of our daily thought processes, not just once in the morning or once in the evening say, "Oh yes, God, hey, help me out, okay?" But moment to moment. What do you want me to say? What do you want me to do? How can I help? How can I be a channel for your love today? In all the mundane activities, in every moment. I was reading a beautiful story from a man who had not a near-death experience, a death experience. He had been dead for an hour and a half when he suddenly he physically saw the light from his hospital bed, and he wanted to move into that light again because he had just seen it while he was dead, and he fell out of bed, and that's how people knew he was still alive. Found him on the floor. How'd you get there? I thought you were dead. And again, his overwhelming experience was that of love. How every human being acts in this world, he said, from lack of love or from love. It's very simple. All the evil that we perceive in the world, all the people we think are just being horrible, acting from love or lack of love. They're learning how to love. And this man, his name was Mellon Thomas Benedict. And he also just talked about how this incredible, like a mandala of human souls exists. every one connected to every other one. Incredibly beautiful, incredibly filled with love. So as we go about our daily lives, let's pray for that resurrection within ourselves, to feel that light, feel that magnetism. When my mother passed away a couple of years ago, a friend in the community received a message from her in meditation. She felt my mother wanting to convey a message to me, so my friend told me this message. And it felt so true. It felt as though it really was my mother speaking to me. She was talking about connecting with all those that accompany her on her spiritual journey. And that's exactly what we have been talking about in the last months and weeks and days of my mother's life, the last hours of her life. We were talking about all those she loved on the other side that she would get to see. And what was particularly interesting for me is that I felt my mother's soul. And it wasn't just my little Italian mother, who's awfully cute and spunky and all of that, all of her little personality traits. It wasn't that. It was this amazing being. Swami also talks about a brother monk that he knew many years ago. And this monk was very sweet, gentle, kind being, but not terribly dynamic and a powerhouse. Swami, again, just a thought of his little personality is very sweet and kindly. But Swami said when he died, he got a hit of who that soul was. And it was magnificent. So, as this chant was saying, someday we will be free from all dreams of earthly life. All our troubles, all our anxieties, all the history and all the stuff we're going through, all the health problems, all of it. It's dreams of earthly life. Who we really are is that soul. Divine, magnificent. And someday we will be resurrected in that soul, in that divine light. So let's practice that now. Let's practice being that essence and draw God into every moment, every thought, every feeling, clinging to that divine until we realize that is who we really are.
Yesterday, a number of us celebrated an Easter tradition of Ananda Sacramento, which, as far as I know, is unique to Ananda Sacramento. We did an all-day meditation, 8-hour meditation, which is typical at Christmas on our path, just before Christmas. But we also do one on Easter. We were not able to do it here in the sanctuary as we have done all the way up until the pandemic. We did it online again, but it was sweet. We did it on Zoom, which means that everyone who's there occupies a little box on your screen. You've got everyone kind of shoehorned into little shoe boxes on your screen, course, if we had this gigantic screen, they would be really big shoe boxes, but still, there's like, there's that one, and there's this one, and there's this one. Of course, everybody had their video off while they were meditating. But even that, which seems a little distant or a little removed, it's not the same thing as being here in the room together. But nevertheless, there was a power in it, and a blessing, and a grace in it. And it's hard to put into words until you experience it, because I don't know about you, but the first time that I ever thought about sitting to meditate for 8 hours, it was like, I don't know how this is going to work out, but this seems like kind of a challenge. And I, in my little way, I had to go and make it more of a challenge the first time, because I thought, okay, I'm going to nail this thing. I'm going to fast. I'm going to walk to the meditation, which meant walking like 4 miles uphill, at Ananda Village in the freezing cold. It was cold. And I mean, December, at 2,500 feet, and that, especially in that era, which was 1979, I mean, it snowed a bunch. And Swamiji, in his special way, would walk in the room, which, we're trying to heat it up with the wood stove. It's a big, huge temple filled with people. He'd say, fling the windows open, let's get some air in here. So, and I'm along by the side there, and, right near one of these windows that's blasting freezing cold air. Blood sugar goes right through the floor. I was cold, my rear end hurt. I mean, it was just like, I don't know about this. And yet, through it all came something. I mean, ultimately what comes is stillness. What comes is Christ in that stillness. And now, 40 odd years later, and 40 or 50 or more of these all-day meditations later, yesterday was an interesting experience, because the trepidation, there's a little bit of that. It's still there. It's like it hovers in the background. Is this going to be okay? And yet, it was like once we launched in, it was like, focus right now. Focus on this kriya. Focus on this section of meditation. Do it uniquely. Do it freshly. Do it like it's the very first time you ever did it. And that's what Nirmala's talking about, learning to love, learning, expressing love or expressing not love. Once we have that love, once we feel that love and offer it, it occurred to me, in human terms, love is a risk. It may sound like a very weird thing to say, but it's like we have to sort of take a chance when we express love, because we don't know what's going to happen. Somebody else could, sort of receive that and go, whoa, 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 I don't know about that. I'm not interested in that, or whatever. They just may be on a very different wavelength. So we don't know when we offer what will come of it, but the very offering of it is a blessing in itself. And this is one of the lessons of the resurrection, one of the lessons of the crucifixion. I loved in the little talk that we heard of Swamiji's, he was expressing how 2,000 years of Christianity, and it's focused on this cross and bearing this cross, and it's all valid on a certain level. But we could focus on the resurrection too, because the cross by itself isn't any good, really. I mean, it's kind of it's called Good Friday, and it kind of seems like Bad Friday in a lot of ways, because, you get nailed on a cross, and it's not a good ending on that level. And yet, come Sunday morning, there's the resurrection. This today, I think, I don't know for positive, but I'm pretty sure it's this year, marks the 50th year, 51, 52, somewhere there, years, that my dad and I have done a prayer vigil on Easter morning. And occasionally, because we've lived in different countries, sometimes when we were in India, for me it fell on Saturday evening because that was Sunday morning, where he was, or vice versa. We sort of worked it out, but time zone wise. But that sharing was precious. That tradition started in the church that we went to when I was a child. And there was a prayer vigil that would begin on Good Friday afternoon and it would end on Easter morning at sunrise. And basically the church was always full of somebody praying during that time, and it was broken up into little 20-minute slots. Now, as you might imagine, the slots on Easter morning at 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 in the morning, they were not real popular. Because, there was a sunrise service on Easter morning, and, if you get up at 2 in the morning and you drive over to the church and you do your little 20-minute or 40-minute session, and then you, now go home, try to get a little more sleep and then come back for the morning service. I mean, it's very awkward. So the ministers usually took those times, but we always made a point of picking one of those really difficult times, like just to make it count more. I think that's partly the spirit of me fasting on my first all-day meditation and, just sort of adding to the struggle. But nevertheless, there was this blessing in it. And that blessing is the blessing of resurrection. Now, how does it happen? In a few moments, we're going to sing the song, Swamiji's song from the oratorio, Christ is risen. And I've always loved, going back to the hymns that we sang as a child, it's always expressed, he is risen, not he was risen. No, he is risen. Well, that's because it happens today. It happens now. It's not just a historical event that happened long ago that's, and people doubt it or debate it or do whatever they do about it. It's now. It's today. And it's an upliftment. This morning with the fire ceremony, we were tuning into the rising fire, the rising energy. That's what resurrection does, is it teaches us, gives us the opportunity to experience that rising energy to a new level of consciousness, a new level of freedom beyond whatever limitation we were stuck with. I looked up the origins of the word Easter, and of course, there's the Greek and there's the Latin Pascha, or in Italian it's Pasqua. But our word comes from Germanic, and it's Oster, and it means the East. And it's fascinating to me how little sprinkles of truth stay with the process, stay with the message all the way along, even though we may not pick up on them. Where is the East? Okay, well, obviously, the East is over there where the sun rises. Well, no, that's not the East that we're talking about. The East is right here. This is the East of the body. Turn towards the East, which is where freedom comes from. I remember graduating from middle school, junior high school, and getting ready to go on to high school. And as a celebration, my family went to a wonderful restaurant, and we went up to the very top of the Hancock building in Chicago, which, it's like the 102nd floor or something. I mean, you're up there a ways. Now they've built this thing where you can walk outside and look through the glass down, 102 floors to the ground. That wasn't there when I was there, but anyway. But I remember, that sort of freaks me out, kind of standing there looking. But I remember from 102 floors up, turning towards the east, away from the setting sun, and looking that direction and thinking about that biblical verse, look to the east. And, at the time, that's all I knew. I didn't really know about this East. I didn't really know about the inner science of it. But that chance to rise, that chance to find freedom, So often when we've run up against something, a challenge, a limitation, there's this tendency to focus on the stuckness of it, the fact that the energy hasn't broken free, that we don't know what to do. And then, come the feelings of, well, I guess I'm no good, or I guess I can't get it, or whatever. And we have to keep our hearts open in that moment. And that's one of the challenging parts of sitting for an all-day meditation is, guess what? You're going to get sore, your rear end is going to get sore, your brain is going to get a little tired because we're not used to sort of focusing that intently. But if we learn to relax, it reminds me of an experience in the orchard. As I was learning to prune an orchard, we inherited an orchard at Ananda when we moved into a house that had something like 85 fruit trees, and we jolly well needed to learn how to prune trees after that. But one of the things I learned about that is that certain trees, I believe peach trees are a prime example, the fruit only comes on the new growth from last year. So, which teaches you something about pruning. You don't want to prune off all the new growth because you're not going to get any fruit. But the other part of it is it can't be let go wild. It's like the new growth in our lives, challenging though it may be, is where the next fruit comes from. And so, like with exercise, often we have to go to the point where we're really struggling to do whatever it is. And that's when we grow. That's when the new growth comes. And similarly with something like an all-day meditation, we have to stay with it. Doesn't mean we have to, breach the line as the champion of the race and all that. It's not about there's no competitiveness in it. It's more just how much of myself can I bring to be present in this moment and invite God to be with me and to open myself completely to that potential. Christ's resurrection, yes, historical event, but the message is for us to say, we can too. We also can be resurrected. And not just from whatever human struggle we're going through, like permanently resurrected in the divine light. That is our own potential. And it's not even just our own potential, it is actually our own destiny. We have to embrace it, yes. We have to walk the walk, yes. But it is actually our own potential and destiny. Let's express that, as Nirmala was saying, through love, through devotion. Know that that grace is our very own.